Hey everybody, this is William Cunningham of My Hope in Marriage. You can visit My Hope in Marriage online at www.myhopeinmarriage.com. That's myhopeinmarriage.com. And My Hope in Marriage is about our purpose is to give you resources, to give you information that you can use to create your own happy and fulfilling marriage. And there's such a challenge. Marriages have such a challenge these days. It's under attack. All right. All right. So now what I want to do in this particular video is to discuss something that I think and is very prevalent in marriages. At least I hope it is. I hope it's just this simple, a matter of ignorance. But I want to talk about the consequences of women not learning to be wives. The consequences in the marriage relationship of women not learning to be wives. And of course, you can go on to, list consequences of society for that as well. Now, this doesn't mean that, husbands are off the hook, but pursuing the truth. My hope in marriage is coming from a man's perspective. Pursuing the Truth is my other ministry website. But anyway, this is from a man's perspective. So I'm talking from a man's perspective, a man and related to his wife. Now, of course, you can do vice versa. It might be a little different because of the dynamics between men and women, but I'm speaking from a man's perspective because I know that perspective. I'm familiar with that perspective. I can relate to that perspective. All right. Okay. Now, when I got married, I realized that I didn't know how to be married. I learned a lot of stuff from my parents, my mother and my father. I learned responsibility from my father. I learned a lot of stuff from my mother, budgeting from my mother, of course, cooking and cleaning from my mom and pop. So I learned a thing, but I never learned, no one ever sat me down and said, okay, this is how you be a good husband. All right, my father, he taught me how to be a responsible person. My mother taught me a lot of stuff as far as budgeting money, making wise decisions and things like that, both my mother and father. But no one sat me down and said, this is how you be a good, well, my father didn't, I learned from observing, right? But then when I got married, I realized I didn't know how to be married. I didn't know what it meant to be a good husband. So, my mindset is always to educate myself when I don't know something, right? And you'd be surprised how many people don't make that connection. All right. But anyway, I began to learn about marriage. And I remember the first book that I got, if I remember correctly, was one on communications. I wish I had that I could show you. It was one about communications. All right. But anyway, I learned to be married because I didn't know how to be married. And I wanted a successful one. I wanted a fulfilling one. I wanted to have a good marriage. Like I'm sure most people do when they get married, they are hoping that it's a good marriage. But I needed to learn what that was in order to really, in my mind, assure that, possibility of having a good marriage. Now, one thing we have to ask ourselves, though, from this particular discussion or video is, what does it mean to be a wife? You have to ask that question because I find that a lot of people, if not most people, go into marriage having no idea of the expectations of the other person, nor do they know what it means to have a good marriage. What is marriage? What is it for? I from my observations, it seems that women are more concerned about the wedding day. It's a big hoopla, and they look forward to that since, from being a little girl. But what about the marriage? In other words, the relationship. Do women who get married know how to be a wife? Do you even know what a wife is? Okay, now, of course, you can switch the flip and say, do husbands know how to be a husband? And you, that's a valid question. But I'm not talking about that. From me, I already told you what I did. I educated myself. And I'm sharing that knowledge with you on my Hope in Marriage and through these videos and the articles that I've written. Okay? So what does it mean to be a wife? I don't want to get into details. There is a corresponding article that you can read to get into perhaps some details. But basically, most people define a wife as that person who's going to upkeep the home. She's going to cook. She's going to clean. She's going to take care of the kids, that type of thing. And some guys, it seems like a lot of guys seems to put the financial management on the wife. I don't know why that is. I don't know. My mother and father did finances, and I learned from both of them. But anyway, we tend to think of a wife as that person that's going to do certain duties, whether it's cleaning, cooking, or what have you. She's going to do laundry. She's going to clean the house and so forth and so on. That's not what a wife is. I know you like to believe that, but that's not what a wife is. What if the little girl growing up never learned to clean? What if she never learned to do laundry? What if she grew up in an environment where, she had an older sister who did it or whatever? So that doesn't limit her from being a wife. Because you could just learn those things. So what is a wife? It is not a woman that subscribes to a particular set of duties. So forget that. Guys, wives are not housewives or children raisers or house cleaners or whatnot. Though the woman may do that, all right, that's not what a wife is. For me, you go back to the Bible in Genesis. A wife, in short, is the man's companion and helper. Pow. There you go. She is the helper and the companion. God created that woman back in Genesis chapter 2. He created it because it was not good for the man to be alone. So he created a helper comparable to him. And remember, they both had dominion over God's creation. He was not her superior, and she was not his superior. They together had dominion. And the Bible talks about them becoming one flesh. So a wife is the companion and helper of a man. Now, how that plays out in your particular culture, in your particular nationality, I don't know, and basically in your culture, may differ. Okay? And it also deals with the expectations of a husband and wife. What did you learn a husband is? What did you learn a wife is? But from the Bible, a wife is the husband's helper and companion. As a matter of fact, that's what women are. Women are designed or created. They were created to help and to be the man's companion. There you go. Now, with that, I found a lot of selfishness with women. All right, and again, I'm not saying that men are not selfish. No, I'm talking from this particular specific perspective. There's a lot of selfishness in women in that I hear a lot of times women are saying, my husband, he doesn't help with the dishes, washing dishes. He doesn't help clean the house. He doesn't help, with the kids at bedtime or whatever. And it's always about how he doesn't help her, when it should be the concern should be the other way around. Yeah. Well, I'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. The concern should be, how are you helping him? How are you being his companion? But what happens is the women will fall into this concept or in this ideal world where her definition of a wife is the housekeeper, the children raiser upper, the cook. She's degraded herself into defining herself as a wife to being that. And that's not the case. How is she helping her husband? Which means, husbands, what are you doing? Are you doing something that she could fulfill her purpose to help you and to be your companion? Or are you a little lazy something doing nothing? but wasting time and airspace. Okay? So I find women to be, not all women, but I found so many women that were just selfish because it was always about them, what he's not doing for them. Even today, you hear, the modern woman expect the man to pay her bills, to do for her, to do everything for her. He has to make a certain amount of money. And the question becomes, what does she bring to the table? Which is usually not much at all, except maybe a trophy. She'll be a trophy for him, somebody that looks good on his arm. And that's pretty much it. All right. But what are you doing as a wife to be your husband's helper and companion? And stop being selfish and making it all about you. Now, with that said, here are the consequences of women who do not learn to be wives. All right. And of course, they're married. First of all, you're going to have conflicts. You're going to have a major conflict because of unmet expectations. All right. He may be of the school of thought that the wife is the one who's going to be cleaning the house. She's going to be the one cooking the meals. She's going to be the one making sure the kids get up and go to school and all that kind of stuff. And some men may even expect their wives to stay home, be at work. What do you call it? A stay-home mom. She doesn't have a career or anything like that. Her career is the family. All right. Some guys believe that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that could be a guy's expectation. Another guy's expectation may be for his wife to be his business partner, and they're going to conquer the world together in business or maybe in religious work or something like that. That might be his expectation. But if hers is different and she doesn't know how to be that wife or to be a wife in general, right? Because you have this general wife, which is just helper and companion, and that can be implemented in many different ways. Okay. So it's important that she learns that. And of course, that comes from communication, because you'll have conflict if he's expecting one thing, but he consistently sees something else. And she may not realize that there's nothing wrong. She may not realize that there's something wrong. All right, because she's ignorant of being that wife. She has no clue. And she doesn't realize that there's a problem. And we'll talk about that a little later. Another consequence of the ignorant wife is that she becomes disconnected from her husband, or her husband becomes disconnected from her. Because I would dare say that most men expect to have a sexual relationship with their wives. And if that doesn't happen, you become disconnected from her. That's just, 1 + 1 is 2, okay? Because that's how guys emotionally connect with their wives, through sex, sensuality, and so forth and so on. And if that doesn't happen, then guess what? You're going to be disconnected, and that in itself leaves room for all kinds of other stuff to grow and have an adverse effect on the marriage relationship. Okay. Another consequence of this ignorant wife who doesn't know, who's just ignorant. And not only ignorant, I want to make this other point. She's not only ignorant, but she chooses to be ignorant. Because it's one thing to be ignorant. Like I said, I was ignorant, but I chose not to be ignorant by learning. I read books. At that time, I listened to tapes. Got articles on websites and so forth eventually. But books and so forth. But anyway, I educated myself. So even if you're ignorant, if you educate yourself, that's better. You decrease the ignorance. But they don't do that. The women don't do that. They don't say, okay, let me learn about marriage. What does it mean to be a wife? But then you have to learn, what does it mean to be a wife to him? Because he may have different expectations. All right. So you need to know that. All right. So you can have that resentment. All right. So that's another consequence, is resentment. Because not only does she not know, she's clueless, but she chooses to be. And he's going to start seeing all that. He's going to start resenting his wife, his children. He's going to start resenting the actual wedding day. Oh man, if only the car was late and we didn't do it. All right, because he's in such misery. He just hates the day he was married because it's brought him so much pain. It didn't bring him the fulfillment that he hoped for, that he expected, because in his mind, his wife is clueless and she doesn't care enough about the relationship to learn about it, to educate herself, to talk about it even. All right, because some guys, or a lot of guys, when they try to talk to their wives, based on the forums that I've been on and so forth, and even I gotta say, even to some extent, my experiences, the women tend to be more emotionally driven. So when you're just trying to bring up an issue that, in your mind, in a guy's mind, is just something you just got to resolve. It's conflict now, but you just resolve it. On the other side of conflict, there's resolution. But you come to know that you can't do that because every time you say something, it's taken emotionally and it blows up, and the original issue is not taken care of, or it's not dealt with in the first place. So that causes a lot of issues as well. And you begin to resent. And resentment is the silent killer of any relationship. Okay, resentment. You don't want to be resenting anyone because and you need to practice forgiveness, but we're not talking about now. This is what happens. This is a consequence of a wife who just isn't her husband's wife. I'll say you're legally a wife, but you're not a wife to him. All right. Okay. Another consequence, of course, is this is a big one. Sexual desire for his wife declines. Not just because, but he does it. Because when you have this ignorance in the relationship and the wife doesn't seem to really be concerned about the relationship, she's just looking at herself. I talked about selfishness earlier, and it's really about her and what she thinks and so forth and so on, that his issues don't get resolved. And in most cases, since there is no emotional connection, which translate into there's not really a sexual relationship, then he's going to start shutting himself off from her. And he's going to, he's not going to expect sexual gratification from his wife. He's going to look at her, perhaps even in the bedroom where she hardly has anything on, and he's going to turn and walk away. Or because if he sits there and stare at her and look at her and try something, he knows not only is nothing going to happen, but he might get, penalized for it or something, or stop, or leave me alone, whatever the case may be. Or I have a headache. All right. So that's going to decline. He's going to turn himself off. He's going to learn to turn himself off for his wife. Unfortunately, it may start to come on somewhere else. All right. I don't want to get into that right now, but that's a problem because that puts a stumbling block in front of him. Because he's going to have that stress all the time, and we will talk about that later. But anyway, the main thing here is to realize his sexual desire for his wife is going to decline by his purposed action. He's going to do it on purpose because he's protecting himself, all right, from being not only just disappointed and rejected, but just don't want to deal with that pain anymore, all right? And of course, because of that, he's going to have this stress in the relationship. He's going to come home every day from work, or he's going to be at home or whatever. And he's going to it's not going to be a place of pleasure. It's not going to be a place of refuge. It's going to be a place of pain. It's going to be like prison. It's going to be, like going to work. All right. So he's always going to have this stress. And if there's no sex, which he probably isn't, he's going to have the stress outside the house. I heard there are lots of enlightened women. I want you to think that all women are bad or that's what I'm saying. No, there are lots of enlightened women out there. And I remember one said, well, several of them said, don't let your man leave the house. Always have your man leave the house empty. In other words, fulfill his sexual needs. That way, when he's out there, he doesn't have to worry about wandering eyes. He'll just think about his wife. Oh, when I get home, you know what I mean? All right, even if she has a headache that night, but that's okay. All right. All right. So he's going to have that stress if his wife isn't there for him. And he may expect that. And I would dare say most men, probably all, would expect to have sex with their wives. All right. And of course, they become roommates. And that's a bad place to be in a marriage. If you have a married couple and they're roommates, that's very bad, because marriages should be more than that. Unless that's what you agreed to, unless that was your expectation. That's okay. I'm talking about if one spouse expects one thing and the other one isn't delivering, and it's because of ignorance and a lack of decreasing the ignorance. All right. You're going to become roommates. Bills will get paid. The house may get cleaned, so forth and so on. But you are just like co-workers at work. You don't have that intimate connection, that emotional connection. You just live in the same house. You're like ships passing in the night. All right. Okay. Another consequence of the clueless wife, if I could say it short, let me just say a woman who didn't learn to be a wife, is that the man is going to be in misery. He had all these hopes and dreams about his relationship, about his marriage. He fell in love with this lady. And you probably had sexual or sexual-like relationships before. Maybe you kissed, hugged, and smooched and all that kind of stuff. But then when you got married, what happened? What happened? All right? So you're in misery. Not just because of that, but because you don't have the companion that you expected. You don't have the helper that you expected. And instead, you have a lot of women who are complaining about their husbands not helping them. But what are you doing to help him? That's what it's about. And husbands, what are you doing so that you need her help? All right? Another consequence is unrealized dreams. You had this hope. You were going to be this couple, and you were going to go out there, you're going to conquer the world, you're going to accomplish this and that and so forth and so on, but only to find that you're two people who just live in the same house. You're not together, so those dreams are smashed. Or so you think. Or so you believe. All right? Now, you have to realize that your wife may be clueless that she's ignorant. She may think she knows. I see that women think that they have this intrinsic knowledge of being a mother and raising kids. Like they have this, and it's really, it's dumb. You don't. No woman knows how to be a mother unless they're taught to be a mother or use common sense. All right? There's certain things you're going to do to protect your child, to do for your child. But there's certain things that you're not going to know. My wife was telling me the other day, years ago when we flew to Florida, when we go to Florida now for vacation, we would drive. But back then we flew it, and she said there was this lady with a baby that was sitting next to me, that my baby was always crying. And she said that she didn't realize that the baby probably was in pain. Ears, you know how you have the ear pressure, maybe the kid was just feeling that. But the mother probably just didn't know what to do. And no one helped her. I told my wife, did anybody say anything? Because I don't even remember. Did anybody say anything? Everybody just probably complained about I don't want to get to that. But she just may be ignorant. All right, women don't have this natural ability of motherhood, like they just know how to be a great mother. No. You learn everything that you know how to do. There's certain things that you can do naturally, all right, intrinsically, but she may be clueless about being a wife. She may be clueless about being your wife. Did you tell her what you expected? Did you tell her what you want? Do you tell her? All right, did you tell him what you think a wife is, what you think a husband is? All right. Communications is key. You have to communicate. Talk before you get married, before that wedding day, before you even propose. What do you think a wife is? What do you expect from a husband? And you got to be truthful, because if you're not truthful and he uses that information, then he's going to say to himself, "Oh, okay, I'm compatible, or you're compatible. So will you marry me?" and you go through it, and then after marriage, you're living together, and you realize, "Wait a minute, I thought you said you were, blah 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 blah. Oh yeah, but you done messed up because you lied." All right. So you have to communicate. Honest communication is key before and during marriage. And you got to keep that emotional stuff out. That drives me nuts. You got to keep that emotional stuff out of it. Don't criticize or come down on her or come down on him. Don't be disrespectful or condescending. Be respectful. Be honest. All right. And just be able to say things, because that conflict is just an opportunity for resolution, which is an opportunity for a better marriage, a better relationship. All right. Now, for those of you who find yourself in a miserable marriage, one that you're not happy with, one that you don't like, that your wife is somewhere else, then guess what? Pursue your dreams. You go after what you want. You're not going to get her help. Maybe she'll come around. So always be on the lookout for that opportunity. Maybe she'll step up. Maybe you weren't doing anything and she was like, "I don't have anything to fulfill my purpose." All right. So, but pursue your dreams. You pursue a happy life, regardless of where your wife is with you or not. All right. All right. So I just wanted to bring those consequences of women who are not taught to be wise, because it's critical. It's a lot more, but that's just like an overview. And again, it's not to blame women or to criticize women. These are things that I've seen consistently over 35 years of marriage, especially these days with the mindset of the modern women, which is devastating to society. Okay, I don't want to get into that. All right, so I hope this has been helpful for you. Ladies, understand what your man wants, what your husband wants. Understand what that man you are perhaps dating now expects in a wife. And always have that channel of communication open so that you can resolve conflicts and you can really enjoy a happy marriage if you're not afraid of resolving conflicts, if you're not afraid of communicating, okay? All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I'm William Cunningham of My Hope in Marriage. Online, www.myhopeinmarriage.com. Until next time, you know what? Be blessed.